There we go. All right. So we are continuing to talk about Parkinson's disease, really kind of from our Tuesday talk. So let me share my screen. We're going to kind of circle back to a few of the slides that we didn't have time to cover at the very end, but I'm going to embed those in what we're talking about today, just so they make more sense contextually. Before I go any further, though, does anybody have any questions, comments, jokes, announcements, anything you want to share?
I have a question about the assessment that we did yesterday.
Yes.
Would we be the ones to go over that score with the patient, or would it be their doctor?
It would be you. Yep. And then
Okay.
what you would do with that is you always want to take in, not just a score, but have kind of a conversational, almost like an elevator speech, but in a nutshell, what does that mean? If you tell somebody, hey, you made a 35, or, what on a different assessment, they don't know what that means. But to, more what you want to say is, we did see some mild issues. And so the good news is that we have some specific things that we can work on for that. And we're going to go ahead and get started with that today. So they have that idea of, we're in this together. We've got this. That's how you address it. So.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? That was a good question, Hillary. Anything else?
I have a question too. Will we be able to see that in the future? Or like, will it expire and us not be able to see it?
That's a good question. My thought is, I think you will have access to it through the end of this course, which is through the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
All right. So everybody remember, if you haven't already turned in your reflection, it is due by midnight tonight. That's all out there, posted on under assignments. So don't forget about that if you didn't already take care of it. All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and talk more about Parkinson's. I have just a short video here that is a review, and it goes a little deeper into the mechanism behind what causes Parkinson's disease, but pay attention to the words that we are already familiar with. That's, like dopamine and degeneration and basal ganglia, those type of words, because it's important. You may have to explain to somebody, a patient or a family member, how did I even get Parkinson's? What is it? So you want to have this kind of for all the conditions we study, you want to have some kind of a couple sentence or bullet point type of explanation that you could give to somebody that would help them understand it, at least as in an introductory level. So here we go. Hopefully I can get this to play. Oh no, it's saying it's private. Well, that's no good. Okay, well, we'll go back to plan B. Okay, so instead, let's talk about what do you guys remember from Tuesday? What do we know about, and you don't have to turn your camera on if you really don't want to, but just kind of holler out or put in the chat box, what do you know or remember about Parkinson's?
Tremors.
Tremors, yes, and we're going to talk more about that today. Yes, that's a good one. Okay, neurotransmitter wise, we already see here on this photo, dopamine. So remember that those go together, and we know from our studies in neurobiology that dopamine, one of the things that it does is it helps with movement. So it helps tell our muscles what to do and how to do it. We also know that it is produced in the substantia nigra. You can see that there. They kind of have the arrow exactly where that is. That's in the basal ganglia. there are roughly 1 million people diagnosed with Parkinson's in the US. Yes, Cameron says deep brain stimulation. So we did watch that cool video on that. That is something that is often used towards the end of the early stage or middle stage to help with the tremors, especially once the medication like L-DOPA that helps to supply more of the dopamine, once that loses more of its effectiveness there. The average age of onset is roughly around 60, but it absolutely, in about a fifth of, no, 1 in 20 of cases, we see that in people even as young as 40 or even in their 30s, like Michael J. Fox. It is chronic and progressive. And also we know it's neurodegenerative. That's because of the death of those dopamine producing cells. Yes, bradykinesia, that's the slowness in movement, the slowness also in the initiation of movement. So we see akinesia. And then Emma reminds us of our helpful word trap, those hallmark signs that we see. And you have that right there, whoops, on your handout, that you see the tremor, the rigidity. And that comes in more in the middle stage, but it definitely is something that can be seen earlier, and it's a hallmark feature. And then akinesia and bradykinesia, and then postural instability. We see all those things, and notice that all of those really have to do with movement. So one similarity that Parkinson's has with Huntington's disease is that it used to be thought of as just a movement disorder. But in studying it more and really looking at the outcomes and the challenges of larger sample groups over time, we know now that it affects mental health and cognition. And those second two reasons second two things I listed are really why it's a prime area for OT to be involved in. We really are the specialists when it comes to the rehab professionals in that, and paired that with movement and our knowledge that meaningful and functional activities outdo exercise every single time in terms of outcome for people with diseases, disorders, illness, injuries. Then that shows us that OT is really an ideal profession to be working with people with Parkinson's disease. All right, so another review is the staging. And this is what's very commonly used with Parkinson's disease, the Hone and Yar staging. So do know this, and it's like a sort of like a spectrum, or trajectory, I guess you would say. People start with the very mild symptoms, and know then that in that stage 1, the tremor, which we're going to talk about next, presents in just one limb. So it might be one leg, one arm. But then when it goes bilateral, then we say the person is in stage 2. And it's in that stage that we'll see that postural instability, and you'll see those things in the gait pattern. So the ambulation, the walking become atypical. And remember, I talked about how if you walk behind somebody and you notice that they're not swinging their arms in a rhythmical way, that's some kind of neurological issue. I mean, unless they have like an injured shoulder muscle or something, but if this is something that is not easily explained in some other way, there's probably something neurological going on, and it could be Parkinson's, especially if, we see those trap hallmark signs and the person fits the demographics, possibly. It's definitely something that should be investigated. So stage 3, then we see much more of that bradykinesia, akinesia. and the equilibrium, so more falls, stage 3. And then even more, the rigidity, then stage 4. Now, the thing that happens at stage 4 that I think sometimes people early in their OT careers might not expect is that the tremors actually lessen then. And that's because of the severe degeneration of those cells in the basal ganglia, that even that involuntary movement is becoming challenging for the body. And then we enter the stage 5, and remember that cachexia is that muscle wasting. That's when people are very thin and look very weak, and they have trouble doing things that are very basic. So they, like sitting up, or, holding a fork, wiping their face, and then if you see tremors, often it's fatigue and just weakness as much as it is a neurological tremor. So in a way, that's something that this disease has in common with MS, is that you may see that fatigue and causing tremor and other problems. So that's the staging. Now let's dig into tremor a little bit more. So what even is tremoring? I've been kind of putting that word out there, and I want to make sure everybody knows what that is. It's unintentional, it's involuntary, and it's rhythmic. It doesn't just happen, like a nap jerk. It involves oscillations, and that means back and forth of one or more body parts. Tremor is, in fact, the most common of all involuntary movements that are considered atypical. So, I'm not talking about blinking or heartbeat. The things that are atypical, this is the most in terms of involuntary. It's the most common in terms of involuntary movements. Also, remember from what we talked about on Tuesday, it's not just the extremities that can be affected, it's anywhere on the body. It can be the tongue, it can be somewhere on the face, it can be the trunk, it can be the voice. It can occur at any age, and it can occur in absence of a neurological condition specifically, and that would be called a benign tremor or essential tremor. So let's get into that. These are the different types of tremor, and tremors are classified in 2 ways: by their appearance, so what they actually look like when you observe the person, and then also by what's causing them. So that's why I have this done in two different colors here. So the ways they're classified are by appearance and by origin. So let's talk about by appearance first. If you're looking at or observing somebody, you might notice that when their tremor is occurring is when they're at rest. We talked about this on Tuesday. This is what we see with people with Parkinson's disease, is typically the resting tremor. So when they're just sitting there, they'll be doing this kind of thing involuntarily. This type of tremor often affects the hands and fingers. And it can be, when somebody's very relaxed, like has their hands in their lap. It might not be, when they're sitting there with their hand in the air, but either way, when they're at rest. And that's kind of the classic tremor that we see with someone with Parkinson's. Now, the flip side of that is the action tremor. And we've talked about that prior to this diagnosis. There are some subtypes of that, but just kind of know this whole category. This is a tremor that happens when somebody is moving. They're intentionally going to do something. And so you may see them standing there with their arms stretched out, like I'm going to reach for this glass of water, and that's causing a tremor. It can happen when somebody is maintaining a posture against gravity. So if somebody's raising their hand in class or reaching for something, but that ends up with them holding their body in an outstretched posture for a while. So that's kind of what an action tremor looks like in opposition to a resting tremor. The other way that tremors are diagnosed or classified is by what's causing them or the origin. So I just mentioned essential tremor, and sometimes it's called a benign tremor. This is actually the most common form of tremors across, any diagnostic category. It can be mild. It can also be non-progressive, or it might progress and get worse over time. Usually it'll be seen in the hands, but you can see it in other parts of the body too. It definitely can affect activities of daily living. The onset of an essential tremor is typically less than 40 years old. So it starts at a younger age, and it can be seen in family trees. So I know a few people that have essential tremor. I know them personally and like socially, and they all have told me that like their dad or there's somebody else in their family, a close relative, has also had essential tremor, but they don't have any kind of a official diagnosis other than just essential tremor. I mean, they've had CAT scans and testing to rule out other things. So that's one type. So the origin of that is we don't really know what the origin is, except potentially or probably it's got some kind of genetic component. Okay, then another kind by origin is the Parkinson's disease tremor. And this one is actually caused by damage or degeneration that happens in the brain in areas that are related to Parkinson's. So think basal ganglia. This often can be the very first sign of Parkinson's. So a resting tremor would fall under this category. But sometimes an action tremor could be a Parkinson's tremor. We're just talking about what the origin is. What's causing that? And the answer is, something in the brain is what's causing it. Something in the basal ganglia that's related to Parkinson's. And then how it looks then would tell us how then to further classify it. Okay, so then there are other types of tremors under origin, and we might, there's a cerebellar tremor. There is an orthostatic tremor. There are many other types, and we don't really need to get into that right now. That would be a much more specialized pocket of knowledge, but I did want you to know that about essential tremor, because I don't want you to automatically assume if you see someone with an essential tremor, hey, that person's got Parkinson's. And then also know that most commonly in someone with Parkinson's, you're going to see a resting tremor, but occasionally, roughly 20 to 25% of cases, that person can also have action tremors. And so in either case of a resting or an action tremor, we see that as something that is very detrimental to their occupational performance. All right, so I'm going to take you to a website here that is the essentialtremor.org. It's the International Essential Tremor Foundation. And what I think is cool here is it actually lists, some different therapies. Many of these are still being researched, but if you go to the site, and I'll post this link separately on Blackboard later, it might be a good one to bookmark or kind of make sure you have written down somewhere, so that if you go out on a field work and see when you get a job and you are working with people with Parkinson's, you can come back to this and explore what's out there, because kind of the latest and greatest type of products that have just been recently patented are put on this website. So this is one that is fairly new out there, the Eli spoon. And so it comes in a soup spoon, that has a bigger bowl to it, or a teaspoon with a smaller bowl to it. And it just is stabilizing. It's kind of reminds me of if a cruise ship that has those big stabilizer bars that go out. So, and you can put different things in there, but it really helps control the tremors. There's a different kind of, there are lots of different cool things on here that are out there to help with functional things. I mean, some of them, the rocker knife has been a thing for 60 years or something. An adaptive knife. There's some, I believe there is at least one of those in the OT kitchen. I think the Good Grips Good Grips utensils, those are at Bed Bath and Beyond. They're on Amazon. They're commercially available, which I think is really cool. So we think of this as what we classify as a universal design, because they really can be used for anybody. A lot of people find the Good Grips design for things just more comfortable. And when things tend to go on the standard market like that, they become more affordable. So other things that you may see, shoes that with elastic laces, because think about how hard it would be to tie shoes with a tremor. Here's a question: if essential tremors are so common, why do we usually see resting tremors more often? Well, I think it's probably where you are seeing those. And I think also people with essential tremors learn to hide them pretty well. That would be my take. And then also resting tremors, because they go along with Parkinson's, and Parkinson's is a progressive condition, it's something that's going to get worse over time. Whereas an essential tremor may just be a little bit of a wobble and it may not ever get worse. So lots of cool things to explore on that site. All right. Any questions or comments about this? All right. So I told you on Tuesday that we're gonna dig into one of these assessment tools, and this one is what I really want you to know for this diagnosis, but you will use it for other diagnoses too. It's a relatively new one, and it's really good. You're going to see as we go through it why I really like it. OTs in general really like it, and it's just really function based. So it's called the Assessment of Motor and Process Skills, or the AMPS. And it's an observational assessment that allows for assessment of the motor component of functional tasks. So that's good, but also the processing, or you could think the cognitive part of that. So it helps us to look at tasks that are beyond just very basic, like doing one button. So they really kind of, the things that are in this assessment get into the territory of complex even. And that's interesting to see. It also includes not just your basic ADLs, but also instrumental ADLs or IADLs, which is really helpful. So it's composed of 16 motor skills and 20 process skills. And through this observational tool, where we can, or the clinician who's administering it, can collect data about not just whether or not somebody can do a certain skill, but the quality of it. That's my favorite part of it, is it's not just a yes or no, can they do it, like pass or fail, but it's how do they do it? And you can, in the observation process, you can figure out so many things to work on just by watching that and thinking about it yourself. Not just can they do it, yes or no, and then you're left with, well, where do I start helping them work on this or that? So that's what I really like about it. The AMPS was actually standardized on a huge sample of people across the world, almost 200,000 people, with a wide range of ages and diagnoses. So that's, I'm not going to ask you those statistics, but it's important to know that it's well researched. The only reason that you would not want to use the AMPS when you think that there's a problem with motor and process skills is if the person is under the age of 2, or if they have a developmental age of very young, or if they have no desire to participate in ADLs or IADLs. And I don't really know who that would be. Maybe somebody with a very high spinal cord injury. So it's very versatile, very useful. All right, so you actually can take a course, which I have done on this assessment. And you don't have to administer it though. Some assessments actually make people take a course and get certified in that before they can administer it. But this one offers it for people to feel more comfortable with it. So you can do that. I just wanted to kind of show you the website there that you can do. And they say that not only is the assessment evidence-based, but also the recommendations for intervention. And, that goes along with what you see as being good ideas for writing goals. That's also evidence-based. And so it's just a really good tool for doing that. So let's look at it a little bit further. What is it? It's a standardized evaluation of ADLs and IADLs. It's occupation-based and client-centered. So we love it because of that. And then another important thing to remember about it is, again, it looks at the quality of the way the person does a task. Not just can they do it, but the quality of it. And so I like that because there's so much gray area. I mean, this even came up yesterday in the SEM, if somebody puts the hands on the clock correctly, but the numbers weren't, do you give them credit? Yes or no? I think a lot of OTs have trouble with very black or white thinking. Like, that's why we tend to hate true or false questions. We always want to write a little caret in and say, unless, or except if this, or in cases of this, because there are always so many caveats. And so the AMPS allows for that. You see this gentleman pouring milk. Well, what if he kept pouring when he got to the edge of the glass and some of it spilled on the counter? If the assessment was one that was just more a yes or no thing. Can he pour a glass of milk for himself? Yes or no? We would all be wondering, do we count that? Because yes, he did, but it wasn't good. So the AMPS would allow you to note that there was some irregularity and some prompting that was needed to do that in a safe, efficient, effective way. So we say that it's occupation based or occupation focused because it's used to look at the quality of occupational performance, not bodily functions. We're not looking at, can he pick up a pound or 2 pounds or raise his arm to 120 degrees, or even do 10 jumping jacks or, any of that. We're looking at function or occupation. The standardized administration, that you guys have talked about what that really means, I know in your EBP courses or course that you've had so far, but for our purposes, just to kind of reiterate that, what it means is that every person who administers the AMPS uses the same procedures. So you start by interviewing the client. You can see that in the first box here. And what you're doing there is finding out what ADL tasks are of concern. What's a priority in terms of ADLs and IADLs for the client? I mean, if they never want to, if they hate orange juice, they're probably not going to be super enthused in doing an activity where you say, pour orange juice halfway up in these 3 glasses. It's almost kind of like that apple question in the sim lab. If it doesn't matter to somebody and they can't put it in the context of their own life, a lot of people have trouble buying into that. I don't know if you guys remember the story that I've told about my ex-husband's great aunt. She broke her hip and was in a rehab facility, and she refused to participate, or she told the OT, no, I don't want to do it. And the OT noted that she had refused. And when I questioned her about it, the great aunt, and said, well, what's the deal with that? Because I know you want to get out of here and go home, and you're going to have to participate to do that. So why did you tell her no? And she said, honey, she told me what we were going to do today was make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and that's for poor people. Where she got that idea is beyond me. And what's, even more ironic is she didn't have a lot of money herself, but I think that's why she was that sensitive to it. She did not want anybody to think that she was, quote unquote poor. So she didn't want to be seen making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, if the OT had asked her that, can you talk to me about why you don't want to participate, that sort of thing. And she had said that to her, then she could have said, what kind of sandwiches do you like? Or what do you want to make in the kitchen that doesn't require cooking? Because we're just doing like cold level food prep. She might have said, girl, I love making sandwiches. I have to keep my, 80-year-old figure looking right or something. So then they could have made a salad, or maybe she wanted a tuna sandwich or something else they could have done. But, similar to somebody not answering a question on the slums because they're allergic to apples, they're going to say, I'm not going to buy apples. That's going to, put me into anaphylactic shock. So that's what I like about the AMPS is that initial interview, you'll discover things that are important. So it's client-centered. And then next, you actually have them do those activities that you talked about in step 1. So that's how you can see the first box. The second box is the little man participating in things that they decided were priorities for him. And in the third box is that too. And then the OT observes and documents the quality of that task performance for each of those tasks. So then what comes after that is the scoring, using the form, which we're going to take a look at, and using that standardized criteria. So again, that standardized administration means that if I did this, if you did it, if Dr. Williams did it, if Dr. Woods did it, we would all get very close to, if not the same exact score. There can be a little bit of discrepancy, but it's going to be minimal here. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Now there's computer software that goes along with this that you actually enter the results in, and that it generates these cool reports that are customizable. And so you can enter your narrative report there, and then you can print that out or take your device in and actually show it to the client and discuss where they are and then what's the plan with them. So step one, interviewing. This is part of the standardized process. It's not like something extra that we're doing. It's something that has to be done as part of the AMPS. Step one. So the OT is asking the client what everyday tasks the person does well, and then what are concerning to him or her. If ADLs are a concern, the client is going to then choose 2 challenging and prioritized tasks. And that's what they're going to start off addressing, because you'll find that sometimes if you ask somebody what all is challenging to you, you get a laundry list. Well, I can't do this, and I don't do this, and I hadn't been able to do this, and I've really just been watching, Montel Williams, and I haven't done this or that. So you kind of have to narrow it down and say, that sounds like a lot. So for right now, let's look at 2 specific things that are important to you that maybe make a difference in how your day goes, that you're having trouble with. And tell me what those are. And then that's what we're going to focus on today. So here are some of the task choices. They're actually, this is a fancy slide, isn't it? There actually are 100 or more than 130 different tasks they can choose from. And they're personal ADLs, simple to very complex meal preparation. Look at that pre-sliced meat or cheese sandwich, that kind of thing. Or you can have them make crepes. Caring for pets or plants. As someone who loves plants, you kind of turn you, and you may be able to see some of the plants on my windowsill. And that's Professor Flick's house out my window. Where that window is, I call that cat TV, because my cats sit in that chair and watch her cat in her window. But I love that they have the plant care on there, because I don't know that I've ever seen that in any other assessment. And for me, if I'm somebody that's getting an OT assessment, you better believe cooking is going to be on there, and care for my pets and care for my plants would be on there. Those things are important and meaningful to me. Maybe I don't even really care. I can just throw my hair in a messy bun. I don't care so much about styling my hair or some of the stuff that and someone else could do my laundry. Maybe I don't care that much, but those things I said before are important. So that's what I love about this test. There's even simple vehicle maintenance, like repairing a bicycle tube. They're calling a bicycle a vehicle, or vacuuming your car. That's a point of pride for a lot of people. I don't know if any of you guys can relate to that. I should probably get a little more into that myself. So here's what we typically hear when in that interview. The things that are usually easier versus the things that are usually harder. I mean, cleaning a bathroom can be hard, especially if it's been a little while. But each AMPS task has been calibrated according to the challenge level. And so if what somebody's doing, if somebody says, I've been having a little trouble combing my hair, and then you have them go through that and it's really easy for them, you then can say, well, let's look on this list and pick one of these things that's a little further down in difficulty, because you really did fine with that. That might have just been that, you had bedhead because you'd been in the hospital for 2 weeks. And now that you're home or in rehab, we're going to ramp things up a little bit. So let's look more at packing a lunch or ironing a shirt, if that's something the person wants and needs to do. Here is an example of something that's on the AMPS. And this is what's considered an essential task. Every time I say that, it cracks me up because, I'm a coffee drinker, right? There we go. And I know a lot of y'all are, but not everybody is. So they have the option of brewed tea also. Not everybody wants that either. So I think it's kind of funny that they call it essential. Some people drink coffee and tea, but they never ever make it at home. They just go somewhere and get it. But we're more than worrying about, is somebody a good coffee maker? We're looking at, do they have the motor skills to do something like this, and the processing skills? So the safety awareness, can they follow multi-step directions? Can they problem solve if, say, you ask them for sweet and low and they don't have that, how can they figure out what to do? So that's why this, I think, is a good example of one of the tasks that's there in the AMPS manual. So for this task, the person is expected to actually boil a pot of water, or brew the tea or coffee, and then pour it into the cup or the mug, and then serve it at the counter or the table with a container of either milk, cream, or hot water with a tea bag. So it's not just a Keurig kind of thing. So it might not be appropriate for somebody who says, oh no, I just go through Starbucks, or I have a Keurig and I've never actually made coffee or tea like this. So then we might want to pick something else, and that would be fine if that's what you and the client decided. There are some options there, that somebody could use a French press. They could use an electric coffee maker, and this is in the manual. There are some choices for alternatives besides just the standard way to do that. They can also heat the water in a microwave, which sometimes people do if they don't have a teapot like that. So what the AMPS is designed to do is to ensure that all people are tested in a consistent manner, but yet they're allowed to do the task in the way they normally do it. So that's why we say it's such a perfect balance between being standardized and client-centered. Probably starting to see why I really like it so much. In summary, the AMPS is used to measure somebody's ADL task performance. And so we evaluate the person's occupational performance, doing things like grasping the knife, repositioning their hand on the knife if they need to go to spread something versus scoop something out of a container, looking at how they manipulate things. How do they use their other hand to hold the cutting board or stabilize the bread or the plate? Did they spread the butter or the mayonnaise or mustard or whatever they're using? Is that spread evenly over the bread or not? So we're looking at that quality in those performance skills. What the AMPS does not do, now this is important, an important distinction, is We're not looking at their grip strength. We're not looking at their range of motion, their visual perception. We're not looking at that specifically. We're also not evaluating the environment, like the table height or how hard the butter is. Instead, we're looking at what somebody does and how they do with what they have. So it's very function, very performance based in the way that it goes through the assessment process. It's each of the performance skills, each of the tasks or activities that you have a client do are scored between 1 and 4. And it describes what that means. It doesn't just leave you to, like, you know, when I gave the example of the man pouring milk and then it went over the edge. I mean, we could probably guess that that would be questionable performance. Because think about that. If he did that and it went over the counter and then on the floor, it could create a fall hazard. It's also wasting milk, and you know, it's not doing it in the way that we really want people to do it. So competent is described in the test as being free of clumsiness or excessive physical effort. Like also if somebody goes to pick up the milk carton and they're like, oh, you know, oh, and you can tell it's really straining them. That would not be considered competent according to this criteria. We also want it to be efficient. So if it's taking somebody an hour to make a cup of coffee, that's not competent. We also want it to be safe and independent. So if you see somebody that's doing something that's not excessive effort, and it's not clumsy, so it's smooth, it's efficient, and safe and independent, that's competent. Now, questionable would be if the therapist questions whether or not there was a problem, like the milk going over the edge. That's the two, I would say 2 and 3 are that gray area that we tend to raise our eyebrows about, or want to put that carrot in on the true and false question, like, wait a minute, I don't want to say this is exactly right or exactly wrong. That's the gray area. So if no problems are observed, that's competent. If we're not sure about it, we think it's competent, but there's maybe an issue, that's a 3. Ineffective is when there's some increased effort or inefficiency noted. It's a little more pronounced than what a 3 might be. And then a 1 is unacceptable, meaning that they either couldn't complete it or it took such a great amount of effort or was done in a really inefficient or unsafe way. So, you know, when I was a kid, there was a game show that was on TV called The Gong Show. And people got up on stage and did their talents. And if there was like a panel of judges, it was kind of like the, you know, precursor to a lot of the America's Got Talent kind of thing we've got going on today. But in the Gong Show, they would actually, if any of the judges didn't like the person's performance, they would get up and hit this gong. And that meant, you know, you're out. You got to stop what you're doing. You're done. And so when I think about the AMPS, I always think about the Gong Show. Like if something really unsafe or it's just taking forever is happening, we can wrap it up and just say, you know, okay, our time is about up. Let me help you with this last part. And I'm going to, you know, do some analysis and we'll talk about how we're going to work together to make this safer and more efficient for you. You know, we'll go over this the next time we get together. So you might kind of bring it on home for them, so to speak. That would be your way of gonging them in a nicer way. You can use the AMPS more than once with the same person by just picking different tasks. So you typically wouldn't choose to have them do the coffee tea thing and then a month later have them do that again. You would choose something else that's close to that or the same in difficulty level. So that's also good because, that way you don't have to keep buying different assessments. You can really compare it in an apples to apples, oranges to oranges type of way. All right, so let's take a break here to the top of the hour, stretch, do some of your, some of your Dr. Weiss ball work if you want to work on that. And we're going to come back and actually, I'm going to talk to you about the scoring, and then we're going to actually practice this a little bit with a video. All right, so let's dig back into what we are talking about. The AMPS, which is one of the big assessments often used with people with Parkinson's disease. Oops. The wrong one. Okay, so when you enter the scoring, when you score that between 1 and 4 for those two tasks that you have the client do, you will get a score and a computer printout that looks like what you see here on the screen. And so it's very helpful. It can be used to predict how much assistance the person would need if they were to be discharged or left alone in their home at that point. And that can be really helpful to families for understanding why somebody needs to go to a rehab facility or to stay there longer, and sometimes to the clients also. So it's something that can help with the explanation of the case of why is therapy necessary? Because sometimes families and even the client don't really realize how much assistance is needed until they are seeing data like this. So in other words, the AMPS can be used to support the OT practitioner's clinical judgment about somebody's need for assistance, especially when that person is wanting to or about to go live in the community, live at home and go around in the community. So if somebody has a severe process deficit, then we know that their safety is going to be more compromised. And we would, and we would want them to have more supervision. So that's a situation where somebody would not even be trusted to stay at home until a caregiver or an aide could come in and help them with physical tasks, because their safety awareness is likely going to be off if their process or cognitive skills are off. So here's what the printout looks like. The blue looks kind of like a thermometer there, is for motor, and the orange is for the process skill set. And so it actually, when you get the printout, it says this. It'll give you the date, and then it'll say someone had mild to moderate issues with the physical, and then, what were their challenges with the process of the task that they participated in. And so you can go into that with the family and the client and it really helps them to have that visual, I think. So it provides these visual representations and then also the narrative account. So again, there's a place when you enter the scores to type a paragraph where you could describe, there was a lot of confusion in the room, so might not have been a fair representation, or something else. The person was having a particularly bad day, or something else you could put in there, and that stuff matters too. The white arrow represents that person's ability. The higher the arrow is along the scale, the higher the person's ability is. So if you look really closely on these arrows, you can see the darker black line here. That's the point at which somebody is considered competent in that task. And remember, competent means that it doesn't require excessive effort. They are smooth, not clumsy. They are efficient. Doesn't take them an hour to do something that should take 5 minutes. And there are no safety concerns. So you see it's different. For this particular task, it's at a 2 on the motor scale and a 1 on the process scale. That darker black cutoff point, that's the line of competency. Below that vertical band means that the person needs assistance and is at a lower level of what we would typically expect for a healthy person at their age. So you can tell here by the person in this example that there's room for improvement here. And let me show you this one again. So notice here, below that, if the motor performance is below that black line on the blue ruler, and if it's below the black line on the orange ruler, that's the process performance. So clearly the AMPS assessment is a really powerful tool to help with discharge planning, and as well as, figuring out what goals would be good for the person. All right, so before we go into what some goals might be commonly for people with Parkinson's, I want to actually have you guys practice or a little bit of that assessment. So here's how we're going to do it. If you would, go under today's course content, if you're not already there, and you'll see where it says materials for sessions 20 and 22. Below that PET scan picture, it says we'll go through the materials during the class on Thursday. Download the AMPS rating form. So you'll see where that motor and process rating form, download that. Make sure I'm on the right thing here. Yeah. So it should look like this. This is the sheet that you would take with you into the person's room or their home if you're doing home health, or have out in front of you in the clinic. So you've already done the interview. You've already decided or co-decided with the client what 2 tasks they are going to do for this test. So let's watch Ken in this video as he's going through one of the tasks, and you can make notes on that form. I encourage you to make notes about the effort, the efficiency, safety, and any assistance that he needs, as if you were right there as the OT student or practitioner doing that observation. So notice here, it's about a 5-minute video. So notice here that I say, pay attention to what he agreed to do and what he actually did. We're going to watch this video twice. It's really important to pay attention to all aspects of it.
Ken, for this task, you said that you were going to prepare yourself a bowl of cereal and a glass of juice. And for the cereal, you said you were going to use honey bunches of oats with milk, but no sugar. And for juice, you're going to pour yourself a glass of orange juice. And I'd like you to serve it there on the counter in front of you. When you're all done, wipe up any spills, put everything away, and let me know when you're done. And while you're doing it, I'm going to be standing over here taking notes. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, but otherwise, I'd rather we not talk.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and start.
And I think that's it.
All right. So let's watch
Okay,
that.
for this-
Whoops. Let's watch that one more time and just double check what you have written down on that sheet. And then I'm going to show you what came out on the AMPS results that the OT practitioner who worked with him actually filled in.
Okay, Ken, for this task, you said that you were going to prepare yourself a bowl of cereal and a glass of juice. And for the cereal, you said you were going to use honey bunches of oats with milk, but no sugar. And for juice, you're going to pour yourself a glass of orange juice. And I'd like you to serve it there on the counter in front of you. When you're all done, wipe up any spills, put everything away, and let me know when you're done. And while you're doing it, I'm going to be standing over here taking notes. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, but otherwise, I'd rather we not talk.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and start.
I think that's it.
Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. So, I have to say administering the AMPS is really kind of fun. You might do it in a kitchen setup like we saw with Ken. That might have been his own kitchen, that might be the environment that you're doing. You also might do it in, a therapy room, a therapy gym kitchen. You might also do it in a simulated kitchen. So you could set up even a room, like if your clinic looked kind of like the media lab. You could just set it up where it was, this is going to be our pretend refrigerator, that kind of thing you could do. So let's look at what the results the therapist had. Oh, Sarah Alias, the therapist. So here we go. She noted that there seemed to be a mild increase in effort, moderate problems in efficiency. She thought there was no risk in safety and no need for assistance there. So then she went in, and this is going to look very much like your activity analysis from Foundations. She noted that, and so this will be none, mild, moderate, or marked, meaning a whole lot. She noted as he went through, and this is kind of why I think it's important to watch if you have the video multiple times. And when you're observing, you get better at doing this. You get quicker and more efficient yourself at doing this. But when he bent or gripped, there weren't specific problems with that. He did definitely fumble the berry package. I thought towards the end of that part of the activity, the way he just kind of flipped the wad of berries, flipped the lot of berries in the bowl of cereal, and a lot of them went in there. I thought that was really kind of cute. He did have to put forth a decent amount of effort lifting the milk. In fact, I don't know if you could hear it or not, but his breathing changed when he was doing that. Like when he did that. He did hold on to the counter when he was walking. There was a lot of force pouring the milk in the cereal, and it was slow. It should not have taken him as long as it did. So notice those are under the motor skills, very much OTPF-ish, right? Then under the process skills, he was looking around and pausing. Here's a big one. He went with the wrong cereal beverage. He came up with the idea of adding the blueberries. It's like he forgot that initial conversation of what he said he was going to do. He did just the way he handled the berry package, that clear plastic container was different. It was atypical. He did kind of pause a lot. Like, did you notice how he opened the refrigerator door and looked for the juice, but then he closed it and then got it from within? That was different too. Stopped pouring the juice before there was enough in the glass. He did look in the wrong cupboard. Had several of these moderate or mild problems. The other big one was that he didn't, when things spilled, like when he over poured the cereal, he didn't seem to really register that had happened. And especially knowing that someone was watching him do that, you'd think he would have, kind of wiped it to the side or said like, oops, or something like that, but he didn't. So all those things would be what you would enter into the computer program on the scoring sheet. Now, let me say one thing. Let me go back to this. I actually noted it here. I want you to compare what you marked on that form with what the one that I just showed you. Note that if your ratings are different than that, it's okay. There is, even though it's a standardized assessment, there is some room for variation in how strict we are between raters, but it should be overall very overall similar. Like if you're noting no problem all the way down as compared to that, then that's an issue. Probably should watch the video again. So then let's go from that to looking at the assessment report that actually comes out when all of that is entered into on the computer. So here's where we have our rulers or thermometers. This is the blue is the motor one. And remember, it's at that 2, the dark line, that is what we would hope to see. That would be considered competent in this particular task. So what ended up happening based on all the ratings for those things, and for Ken, who is 72, is that there was mild to moderate clumsiness and or increased physical effort or fatigue for him. That's from a motor standpoint. So he is below where we would like to see him be. And then in a processing standpoint, so look there, we're just about 1.25 standard deviations below. And we're a little more than that in processing here. Here's our competency line. And it actually came out with a moderate to marked inefficiency and disorganization. So it's, it's more than 1.5 standard deviations below. And so the summary, this is exactly what would print out from that program is, he did all the beverage from the computer and then all putting on socks and shoes. You saw that in a previous photo. So you see what he did there and then how that worked out. And then the overall findings are that he demonstrated a mild clumsiness and moderate inefficiency. And he did leave the refrigerator door open, so we saw that too. So there is the example for that. Any questions or comments about that before we move on to some general goals and intervention strategies for people with Parkinson's? I bet you guys can see why OTs really like that assessment. I mean, to me, it just seems so very OT-ish. Even using a lot of that language, whoops, I'm going to do that, straight out of the OTPF. All right, so we're gonna continue on. Now, this came from a study back in 2005, and I haven't found an updated study on this, but somebody needs to do one. I think it would be very fascinating to compare. My prediction would be, I bet it hasn't changed much at all. If anything, I think there might be an addition somewhere of something to do with technology, like using a cell phone. People with Parkinson's are going to have difficulty with that. And it might be even that if they're texting on a phone, we might say, if you can get your hands on a tablet, they may not know they can also text on a tablet. And so there may be some technology component that enters into this if we did an updated study today. But take a look at these. Look at what's first. Reducing the risk of falls. And then that really is very closely tied with number 2, increasing safety in the bathroom. because the bathroom is the number one room in the house where falls happen. It makes sense. People love, bath mats. And so it's easy to trip on those, especially if they or people have towels or their dirty clothes in the floor. It's easy to stumble on those. There's a lot of slippery stuff. There's when you're having to step over the edge of a tub or shower to get in and out. There's just a lot of things that are risk there that can cause or contribute to a fall. Reduce effort and improve efficiency during kitchen, domestic, and meal prep. Reduce impact of fatigue on ADLs. Again, transfers. Improve efficiency when eating and drinking. I'm so glad to see number 7 on there, satisfaction with leisure activities, and reducing effort and increasing safety when dressing. So obviously the goals should be more specific than this. You wouldn't want to say Ken will reduce effort during transfers. That's not a good goal with, the criteria we use for a goal. But these are the general categories of what OT clinicians tend to have for their goals for clients with Parkinson's disease. What kind of interventions do we do? Well, I mentioned this a little bit already, but I want to say this because it's definitely something that is under that OT scope of practice is exercise. Now, I like to say we need to differentiate ourselves from PTs by not just doing therapeutic exercise. And even the way we say home exercise program, we need to make sure that people know that when OTs say exercise, we don't just mean, sit-ups and lifting weights kind of exercise. We think of exercise as activities, walking around the block is exercise, that kind of thing. Clean out your garage is exercise. Playing ball with your dog in the backyard, that's exercise. Or taking your dog to the dog park, that can be exercise. So for somebody with Parkinson's, research shows us strongly that the way to stretch the time out between those phases, so in other words, to make it so that the person is in phase 1 a lot longer before they go to phase 2, before that their symptoms increase, before things get worse, is activity, to keep their activity level up. And participating in exercise groups and classes, things like Dr. Weiss showed us, are very evidence-based for people with Parkinson's disease. Tai Chi, yoga, and then I mentioned, and I put the video up for y'all from my OTA friend, Stephanie, who has the gym in Kansas City for people with Parkinson's, and she does the Rock Steady boxing program. That might be a cool thing to Google and see, is that going around in Memphis? And if so, can you go observe? I know it is going on in Memphis because I have a good friend who has Parkinson's who goes to those classes. So we know that physical activity helps to maintain and improve mobility and strength, and that leads to improved and occupational performance. It's balance, that's a big thing. We see that, and core strength, and that helps with postural control, so that combats that, and it also helps with endurance. We do though want to talk to people about their increased risk of falls. So if somebody's just continuing to go to their regular gym, they might need to be extra cautious. Like, don't get on the treadmill and crank it up to a speed that you're not capable of doing. Let people know that it's okay to walk instead of run. You don't have to, do the most out there. And what I have heard recommended to people with Parkinson's is for them to get a heart rate monitor and actually just work on getting their heart rate in a certain range. And so they might do that in a bunch of different ways. Maybe they just go walk around their neighborhood or in the park, or on the treadmill, or they're playing tennis or swimming, or doing a water aerobics class at the YMCA, something like that, but they're paying attention to their heart rate so they know they're getting that good cardiovascular benefit to it. I think I've told y'all this story, but one of the things that I got to do in OT school, and maybe one day we'll get approval to do something like this through our program, is one of my professors ran a Parkinson's exercise group once a week at a YMCA just down the street from where my program was, and we could sign up to go with her. And so in one room, there was a support group for the spouses or significant other of the person with Parkinson's. And that it was very educational, but it also touched on how are you doing, how are you coping, sharing ideas and just support of each other. And then the other room was the gymnasium. And that's where that's where she really had the students be more. And we did exercises. We would do the hokey pokey, we would play musical chairs, we would do all kinds of things. So trying to make that exercise we would have free throw contests, we would play horse, different things with people with early or maybe early middle stage Parkinson's disease, to try to keep them in good physical condition, to stretch out the time that before they need more assistance and are having more symptoms. So again, here are the focuses of OT intervention. This is the kind of thing we would look at working towards.
Back to the
Okay, let me show you another. This is just a short video.
The Future was a film that helped define the 1980s and made Michael J. Fox a star. More hit movies followed, as did a string of awards for his TV series like Spin City. Now, though, his future's increasingly defined by Parkinson's disease.
As soon as I wake up, I can't go back to sleep. I mean, it starts going. So I would say that's the toughest part in the morning is to kind of go, well, I'm up whether I like it or not, I'm up now. And the other thing that happens to me in the morning, first thing is I get that dystonia, which is kind of cramping, and it can be very extreme.
In a rare interview on ABC, he spoke about the new challenges from something as simple as using a toothbrush.
Because I have to put the brush down on the countertop, hold it flat, and get the brush on, because if I hold it, I'll miss it. It's a moving target. But then once I get all loaded up, then I just gotta bring it up to my mouth and then just let it go.
Remarkably, he also revealed that ice skating appears to temporarily block his symptoms,
Isn't this
but
cool?
only while he keeps moving. There's no cure for Parkinson's, but Michael J. Fox has been fighting to change that. He's gone from actor to activist, campaigning for politicians backing stem cell research, which might offer hope to Parkinson's sufferers. Millions have seen the powerful TV campaign he made a few years ago.
They say all politics is local, but it's not always the case. What you do in Missouri matters to millions of Americans like me.
Michael J. Fox returns to ABC with...
He devotes much of his life now to raising awareness about Parkinson's, and after many years off the big screen, he says he still watches his old life on the small screen.
In any given moment, I can flip through channel and see myself, and for a long time it was just like I stumble on an infomercial or something and just keep clicking. But now every now and then I will stop and watch it a little bit, and I'll just enjoy it. I'll just enjoy it for what it is and the time it was in my life, and I don't have any. There's no wistfulness in it. There's no longing.
Richard Lister, BBC News.
I think the ice skating thing is so fascinating. It reminds me of how I've always heard that some people who stutter can sing without stuttering. I love him too, Courtney. I just think he's so cool. There's a lot of good things out there, good resources on Parkinson's. And I think it's really cool to dig into an understanding of that. I'm going to post some supplemental resources that you guys could dig into on today's course content if you're interested in that. It's totally extra. I know you guys have a lot on your plate. But before we dismiss, I'm going to show you one more little video, and then we will, I know you've got something due tomorrow, and we will see each other again tomorrow. So I'm going to let you go a little bit early, but first let's watch this inspirational video.
Oftentimes, people look at neurodegenerative disorders, such as Parkinson's disease, as a bleak diagnosis, one in which quality of life and functional independence are suddenly left behind. Yet in the face of extreme adversity, some people manage to retain their sense of self. Part of my interest in becoming a neurologist is the opportunity to be an advocate for those faced with unanticipated life-altering conditions. Along with many of you, I too have a commitment to advancing medical care for brain and spine disorders through research and innovation. In the course of my medical studies, I have learned pathophysiology and medical management of Parkinson's disease. However, I had not discovered for myself what its impact on quality of life looked like. Then one fine day, I met John. We first connected over our love of oldies music. John then shared his story. 16 years ago, he was diagnosed with idiopathic Parkinson's disease. John had no idea that he was being affected by the disease until his coworkers began to notice his tremors.
I don't think I fully recognized that I had Parkinson's. But people would tell me what are you shaking for? Somebody said I had Parkinson's. And I didn't really think much about it.
After 15 years, John and his family elected to have a deep brain stimulator implanted in order to reduce his risk of falling and his high burden of medications. While DBS has proven effective for some patients, there is potential for serious complications and side effects. To see how John was faring, we met with him a month after his surgery on his first day of rehabilitation. Just 1 week prior, he had developed a concussion after a fall, but was in good spirits. It was clear that his sense of humor could weather any setbacks.
Yeah, they're big on safety here. I'm not supposed to move out of the bed without supervision.
Oh, really? Do they have one of those alarms that goes off?
Yep.
If we get
I set that off today. I'm getting independent fast.
John continued his physical therapy and made great strides thanks to his determination and the help of his medical team. Despite suffering a fall during rehab, John persevered. He adjusted to his new DBS settings and his motor symptoms continued to improve. Impressed by John's tenacity, we followed up with his internist to get an update on his progress. He was still telling jokes and was upbeat as ever.
See his resting tremor?
So no falls since you've been home. Any other issues?
Balance. When I'm riding and we stop, like I'm over here, I have a dizziness. And so I'd like you to check my ears.
Okay.
Especially
after we drive.
Yeah. It's just sitting here, like right now, if there's dizziness, it's pretty much worn off,
Okay.
but I can still feel it a bit.
Okay. Well, we'll look in your ears then. Any change in your hearing or anything?
What?
Any change in your I'm gonna say that's a no. Meeting John, a man with such humor and humanity, reminds me, as both a medical student and future neurologist, to never take life's joyful moments for granted. I learned more than I could have imagined about the quality of life that can be had with Parkinson's disease.
They need to be aware that Parkinson's is not a total debilitating. You still have a life. And like any life. You want to live it to its fullest. Do whatever you can.
John's words are more than just a message to those affected by Parkinson's. They are a message to anyone struggling with chronic disease. You can still have a life. On the eve of graduating medical school, I asked myself, why do I do what I do? The answer is clear for people like John.
Woolly, woolly.
That's the music I always think of. You know what I'm talking about? That genre.
That was many years ago. Till I got old.
All right, just a little inspiration for the road. Any questions? Anything you guys want to chime in about before we conclude? All right, well, that's all I have for you today. I will see you tomorrow. We will have case study presentations at the top of the class tomorrow, in breakout sessions, just like we did on Tuesday. And so I'll see you back in the Zoom room tomorrow. Hope y'all have a great afternoon.